My name is Bob Linden, and I'd like to welcome each of you to today's web clinic, which is entitled How to Grow the Agency Organically, a step-by-step plan to grow your existing business. So few agencies spend as much time and effort developing their existing business as they do pursuing new business. Today's web clinic leaders, Phil Asche and Hayes Roth, will review their approach to organic growth, which is based on developing a rigorous, bottoms-up, actionable plan looking at the largest clients that account for 80% of an agency's revenue. Before we start, some housekeeping. You can hear us, but we cannot hear you. If you have any problems viewing the presentation on your computer, it could be a firewall or security issue on your end, and you may need to contact your IT person. If you need to contact us via email, please send an email to webclinics@filamentinc.com. We'll help you if you have any technical issues, and if you disconnect for any reason, just go back to the email invitation and log in again. Our web clinic leaders today are Phil Asche and Hayes Roth. Phil Asche has served as Executive Vice President and Senior Worldwide Account Director in the New York headquarters of Young & Rubicam and led Y&R's worldwide work for major consumer and B2B clients such as American Express, Colgate-Palmolive, and DuPont. For the past 10 years, he has been Senior Partner, Relationship Audits and Management, a consultancy specializing to help agencies retain and develop business. Hayes Roth leads a marketing and business relationship management consultancy specializing in the healthcare, nonprofit, financial, and professional services industries. With 40 years of global branding and marketing expertise, he has a reputation for solving complex communication challenges and getting the job done on time, on budget, and on target. At the end of the web clinic, we'll have a few minutes for questions. However, please feel free to send us your questions as we go through the web clinic. You can send us your questions via the Q&A box, which should be on your computer, or you can email us your questions at webclinics@filamentinc.com. We encourage everyone to tweet during this webinar using the hashtag FilamentWebClinics. Just to differentiate Phil and Hayes so you know who is talking, Phil is from Australia, so he will be the one with the funny accent. And Hayes does not have an accent, although I guess if you're in Australia, Phil does not have an accent. Anyway, on that note, please welcome Phil Asche and Hayes Roth.
Thank you, Bob. I actually grew up in Minnesota, so I have a Midwestern accent somewhere in there. We appreciate everybody joining us today, and we are looking forward to talk about a topic that Phil and I both hold dear to our hearts, having worked in the agency business ourselves together and separately for many, many years. And that is how to grow your agency organically. And we're going to start by taking you through a brief overview of our company, Relationship Audits and Management, just so you have some understanding of who we are and what we do generally. And then Phil's going to go into discussing how you create a rigorous plan to grow existing business, which we believe is critical to the success of any agency or firm in the service business. He'll discuss doing a SWOT analysis for existing clients, analyzing opportunities to generate additional revenue. We'll talk about increasing your agency's share of the client's total spend on marketing communications, setting realistic targets and plans that you can actually action and in order to achieve your target goals, and identifying key tasks and resource needs, who, what, when, and where that necessary to achieve the goals that you've set for yourselves. First, a little bit about us. Relationship Audits and Management is a global firm that's been around for 15 plus years, specializing in the measurement of agency-client relationships. And when we do that, we identify the opportunities to maximize greatest value from both sides of the equation. We work globally for agencies, clients, and associations, and our core services include client relationship auditing and listening programs, supplier relationship reviews, win-loss and pitch reviews, internal stakeholder relationships, relationship diligence and client referencing, and training and consultancy for all of the above. Last year, in fact, we did over 30,000 assessments, and it's this kind of data that is informing the information that we're about to share with you. Just a little bit about our clients. As I said, we talk with client organizations. I'm sure you recognize some of them here. And we also spend a lot of time with agencies and PR firms and branding firms, many of whom are listed here. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Phil, who's going to talk a bit more about what it is, why we believe this is so important.
Well, thank you, Hayes, and good afternoon, everyone. As you can see on the slide, the agency holding companies predict Marcom spend to increase only 3% this year in the US. And that tells me that with all the cost increases you will face, you need to grow your agency's income significantly more than your fair share. But unfortunately, the new business odds are getting worse. Larger agencies are chasing smaller and smaller opportunities. Smaller agencies are just chasing everything. Meanwhile, marketers and procurement are driving fees down ever more while asking for more and more. And that's only going to get worse as company margins come under attack and procurement continues to gain power. It will be all about the perceived value of the output, not the cost of the inputs. And here is another sobering fact. If you win a significant piece of business, the odds are that in year one, the year you win the business, you will receive only 50% of the annualized income you hope to make. Let's not mention what you spent on the pitch. And if that wasn't bad enough, the ANA reports that in the last 3 years, a majority of clients with in-house capabilities have moved assignments inside. They're moving assignments inside that were previously handled by external agencies. So we think it's obvious that in addition to new business, you need to go all out to grow existing business. So let's preview what are the essentials to growing existing business. They're fairly obvious, things like differentiation, relationships, the fact that you need to make organic growth everyone's business at the agency. As you would expect, you need to know the client's business. You need to know where you stand versus the competition. Very importantly, and we'll talk a lot about this today, you need actionable plans, and you need to regularly review the achievement versus plan. You need a communications plan, you need to empower and reward growth, and you need to retain the key people that the client values. So these are the 10 core activities that we see as being essential to sustain growth with existing clients. Most of this is common sense and shouldn't be a surprise to you. In our view, it's the consistency of execution that makes the difference. I'll just pause here for a moment and let you take them in. But let me ask you to note any which were not front of mind. So let's now move on to differentiation. Oh my, why do they always start with the hard one? Yes, differentiation for your agency. As Hayes mentioned, each year we conduct numerous assessments of won and lost new business pitches. Clients consistently say, the agencies mostly say the same thing, that there is very little meaningful differentiation, that most of what the agencies claim is just puffery. So you need to be honest with yourself when looking at your competitive arena and who you really compete with. Do you have some demonstrable expertise that sets you apart? Do you have some proof? Maybe not hard data, but at least you could use client testimonials. Is your agency viewed as the go-to resource for a particular capability? And are you consistently getting the story out about what your agency is doing and how you are making a difference to your client's business? Do you regularly seek out people who have a view of how your agency stacks up against the competition? What are your advantages? What are your shortcomings? What's your reputation on the street? And more importantly, in the client hallways. Okay, now for relationships. Oh no, must we really talk about that as well? Yes, we must talk about this because this will be one of the most important things that determines how you can grow your business with the existing clients. Now, when we look at this next slide here, what's really scary about this defection number of 65% is that many of the clients apparently within the previous 12 months said they were satisfied with the agency. 65% satisfied with the agency, but then the agency's gone. What do we make of that? What we frequently hear in the numerous client interviews we do is that the clients were merely satisfied, but not delighted. In other words, they were open to an alternative service provider. Now, this slide has a useful checklist that mostly makes common sense. Of course, you put the client first, don't you? And you go the extra mile. But do you really? These days, many client organizations seem to be caught up in unending change. So it's easy to fall out of step with the new reality. And in particular, who are now the key decision makers. And this is one of our favorites. Think about this. Do your clients really look forward to meetings with the agency? Now let's look at a real example of how timely and actionable intelligence with consistent follow-through can really make a difference. A few years back, one of our agency clients was concerned about an important client relationship. They asked us to do interviews with a representative sample of the clients. Here's what we found. As you can see, 3 years ago, this relationship, 2014, was really in trouble. Few client expectations were being met. The agency is underperforming in many areas. There are a few positive senior relationships, but most clients are not happy. There's a low overall performance score of 3.9 on a 7 scale, and there's a looming threat of a competitive agency review. So we helped the agency develop a clear, actionable plan. We interviewed the representative sample of clients. The plan was implemented. The clients and agencies aligned with the plan. Unfortunately, some agency staff had to be changed, but pretty soon the demonstrable improvements were recognized by most clients. So the overall performance score improved to 5.2 the following year, and there was no review. By 2016, the situation looks like a total turnaround. Most clients are delighted with the agency. The agency is now viewed as a trusted advisor, which should be the goal. Overall performance score is 6 on a 7 scale, and the agency has been rewarded with additional assignments. Over to Hayes.
Got the mute button. So therein lies the problem and the opportunity. Why don't we talk about how we get there? And the first step of this is how you even think about growth. And since I spent most of my life in the mostly advertising and branding business on the agency side, it always struck me that new business and building client business always seemed to be somebody else's job. Go back one. And invariably, it was relegated to either the new business team or the client relationship director or a senior player in the company whose job it was to really know the client. But the fact of the matter is, it's everyone's business. And everyone in the agency, no matter what you're doing, whether you're creative or production or digital or whatever your responsibility, you should be thinking of ideas constantly to help grow your client's business. And of course, then many people, and I've heard this often, that people complain, oh, you know, I don't have the big idea. I don't want to go to a client with something small. But the fact of the matter is, the more you go to clients with ideas that you've thought about and considered along the way, the more receptive they're going to be to you as a trusted advisor. And frankly, singles and doubles do the job. The client isn't counting how many wins you have. What they're counting on is for you to think through what their business is and how you can help them. And so when you do think about these ideas, don't limit them to your expertise or swimming lane. Think about how to extend an assignment beyond what you do every day, maybe into consumer engagement if you're not involved in that, or something to do with the sales force or distributors, or something that the CEO might want to have as his or her personal objective along the way. Those ideas actually can help clients think about things in a broader context. And if you come to them with new ideas that are sort of out of your safety zone, then you're clearly thinking out of the box. And bring ideas that help the client, not that only help the agency. Many a senior client tells us, I'd like to hear from the agency, but I don't need to hear from them every time they want to get more business out of me. Bring me an idea that can help my business and we'll all benefit. So the fundamental here is everyone should be thinking about it. And I can tell you that the best creative directors I ever worked with and design directors were those who thought about the client first. But then what about shorter-term project-driven relationships? I worked in the branding business for a number of years. It's very often that you're working on a project that has a beginning, middle, and end. And when it's over, you're basically done. So what do you do about that? How do you make those sticky? How do you build a relationship when you know that there's an end game somewhere in there and that you're going to have to go out and hunt for more business somewhere else? Well, the first thing to do is always go beyond the brief. Over-delivering is always rewarded and recognized. That's a fundamental. The other thing that I certainly noticed along the way, and those of you in project-driven businesses, like sometimes PR and digital, probably see the same thing. You're brought in to solve a particular problem. Invariably, there's other agencies already in there. Some of them may be long-term players. Others may be brought in to help solve the same problem. Whatever the situation, your job is to work well with your partners, to play nicely. And we know from long experience that clients want their agencies to work well together. So as a great team player, it's amazing what you can accomplish if you're not putting your own agenda first, but rather the client's. And that requires integration, it requires consideration, but what often happens, and I saw this many times, other agencies learn to respect you. They know that you're not there to poach, you're there to help. And when it comes time for them to be talking to another client who needs a certain kind of help that maybe you can provide, you will always come up as a recommended provider. It's a great business development tool, and it always helps existing clients. And while you're working on projects, keep your antenna raised, because as you're solving one problem, if you're paying attention to where it fits into the larger challenge, you might be surprised at how there are ancillary pieces of business that you can go after that the client is looking to get solved. So again, be aware of where you fit into the overall scheme of things, be a ready and willing partner, and make sure that your other partners along the way recognize you as a fair and credible companion along the trip. Above all, take a long-term view. Clients want to work with people they like and trust. It isn't about the tactical solution tomorrow. We have plenty of those to do, but real partners are looking at the future and how they can help over time. Now, this seems like a fundamental, knowing the client's business. That's sort of account executive 101. But it is amazing how often we take it for granted or pay lip service to it, as Phil was talking about earlier. Do your account leads really know the client's industry and business? Are they able to put themselves in the client's shoes? Would their clients agree that they can do that? Do they monitor news about the company or the industry? Do they listen to earnings calls? Do they understand how their clients are evaluated and incentivized? Do you know what your clients are motivated to do and what their ambitions are, both personally and corporately? Do you know what they're worried about, what keeps them up at night? And do you know which client wants to change and why? And change can mean many things. Sometimes the client wants to change agencies. Other times the client wants to change something within the organization. And maybe you can help him or her do that and become a standout. Ultimately, you want to be considered an extension of the client's marketing department. And you can only do that if you go back over this list and make sure that you're adhering to the principles stated herein. You really have to think about the client's business first and foremost and understand it.
Okay, let's talk about your agency versus your competition. You have to learn how to be brutally hard on yourself and your agency when you consider this. Doing this well is usually painful. Let's see why. Can you objectively and honestly answer the following questions? If it was entirely up to individual clients, how many of them would choose to reappoint you or award you more assignments? What do they think your agency does well? What would your clients say? What would they say you should improve or do differently? Is the agency's performance improving or getting weaker? I promise you it's not status quo. As the client looks forward, how do they see their marketing communications needs changing? And how well equipped do they think your agency is to meet their future needs? The point is here, do you really have an objective scorecard? Or are you operating on old information? Or worse still, only hearing what you want to hear? So here are a couple of tips. Do you know if there are capabilities the client would like to get, but doesn't think your agency can deliver or not deliver as well as another service provider? Have you asked your clients to give you one piece of advice? What do you think they would say? So on the next slide, we're going to see how they might think about where you are, but you need actionable intelligence. You really want to know how they see you. Are you reactive, responsive, proactive, or leaders? Do any of them really care? Do they have the same view at different levels within the client organization? Does the day-to-day management have a different view than the executive leadership? This raises the important question: does your agency really understand and know how to work with the client culture? Are the people who work on the business at the agency a good fit with the client? Now, for any company, any client company, there are numerous characteristics that need to be considered. These characteristics should not be thought of as positive or negative, but rather they will inform your whole approach to the vital task of making an emotional connection with the clients. So here's a partial checklist of things to consider about the client company persona. First, what is the core competency or driver of the company? Is it engineering? Is it high science? Is it innovation? Is it marketing or their sales network? Is it manufacturing or process management? Think about different industries, think about different client companies you know, and think about how there are different drivers at work in these companies. The next question is there a type of person who typifies mid-management or senior management? For example, are they risk averse, or are they really intelligent risk takers? Are they willing to step forward, or is the culture mostly decision avoidance? Is the culture very analytical and detail-minded, or focused on the big idea or concept? The next question, how do they discuss, review major issues? Is there a formal established procedure with very specific meeting materials required? Or is their approach very informal or casual? Are they mostly collegial, abrasive, or passive-aggressive? Another question to ask, what is the style of decision-making? Is it hierarchical? Is it consensus? Or is it back channel? Are they quick to reach a decision? Or do they like to boil the ocean? What is the dress code? The point here is you really understand this client organization, the persona, how they work, and how you need to work with them to grow your business. Let's move on now to a really important pillar in growing the business, and that's account development plans. They're essential to achieving two primary goals that you must have: continuous improvement in our delivery for the client and revenue growth for the agency. As you review point number 2, client business and communications overview, and point number 3, where are we with the client, you'll quickly see which of your account leads really understands the client's business, the client challenges and opportunities, and how they're relevant to the agency, and the agency's challenges and opportunities with this client. So for process here, please emphasize brevity with bullet points instead of prose. Make sure your account leads know this should not be a compendium of everything we know about the client company. Rather, it should be limited to what the agency management needs to know. On the next slide, we're going to see in 4A and B, it never ceases to amaze us how often account leads and agency leadership cannot answer these two vital questions. What is the vision for what the agency can do for this client? What is the vision for what this client can mean for the agency? Is it marquee value? Is it creative reputation? Is it a great training ground? Is it the ability to hire best people because it's an attractive client to work on? It's critical that you get this right. And the answers will tell you a lot about the leadership quality of your account leads and whether your agency management team is actually a team and is aligned with the same view of where we want to go with this client. And please, 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 don't request or allow unrealistic goals and targets. Instead, enable a robust discussion to agree on some stretch that's plausible. On the next slide, we're talking about a key task outline. Here's a real tip. The success of any worthwhile plan is going to require the accomplishment of a few key tasks. A select few is good. More than 5 is too many. Make sure the number of tasks allotted to an individual taskmaster is realistic. You can't expect Mary or Bob to do everything. Question the reality of the dates. Importantly, be very tough on the criteria for measurement of success. They may not be hard numbers. Hopefully there are some hard numbers, but other things you need to agree on. How will you know if you're successful? And finally, and also very important, you have to make sure the whole management team accepts and agrees to their part in making this happen. Let's go to number 7 now. Review achievement versus plan. It's hard to overemphasize the importance of accountability, and rigorous reviews with the management team regarding achievement versus plan are essential. You want to hold, on the next slide, you want to hold formal reviews with account leads and agency management, I suggest twice yearly. The review should be cryptic and no more than 2 pages of bullet points. In fact, it's hard to imagine why an individual account review, or any agency meeting for that matter, should take more than 1 hour. And please start and finish on time. Discipline helps. You should work at establishing a positive and collegial atmosphere, but also ask hard questions. For example, how do we know the agency is making a difference to the client's business? What are we doing differently this year? Here's the one. Everything is going well, so what can go wrong? And I suggest that you be totally unforgiving of lack of preparation, because if they're not prepared for this meeting, you can be sure they're not prepared for the client meeting. Now let me introduce a way of thinking about your account leads. It will make a difference to your business. On this slide here, we see two axes to assess the Account Director Performance Index. On the left, the agency and client goals. On the horizontal axis, personal skills and characteristics. Like most of these quadrants, you want your people to be in the top right-hand box. You want broad achievers of both axes. They're your champions. They are the people who ensure that the client goals and the agency goals are met while exhibiting outstanding personal skills and characteristics. Hopefully, you don't have any millstones, people who unfortunately scored in the bottom left-hand box. If you have any of those people, get rid of them. Be brutal about it. There's no place for them in a successful agency. They're not going to help you secure the business with existing clients. And above all, they're not going to help you get more business from existing clients. So this is an interesting way of thinking about your account leads. We have lots of background on this, lots of questionnaires. If you want more information about it, please feel free to reach out to us. Back to you, I think, Hayes. Hayes?
The mute button, pardon me. Let's talk a little bit about how we communicate with our clients and also with ourselves. And this is a bit ironic because most of us are in the communication business and we think in terms of being great communicators. However, in fact, a lot of what we talk about is to ourselves and not to our clients. Too often we spend time writing emails, maybe leaving voicemails, maybe writing some kind of a position paper or a pitch proposal. But to actually have dialogue with them, as Phil was indicating earlier, is what makes a difference. And let's talk about some techniques that you can use to actually bring clients into your world and vice versa. One of the things we've found over the years that clients want to hear about is what else you're doing. What else are you doing for other clients? What's your great work? This is more than just sending a good-looking reel or a link to a website. It's really talking about what went into something that changed for the better your client, another client's world. And we would recommend perhaps bringing in your client once or twice a year to sit down and just say, we want to just take you through what we've been doing for the past year. In essence, you're pitching your current client. When we go to all this preparation to dazzle a new business prospect, what do we do to entertain and engage our current clients? If you brought them in for half a day and took them through a bunch of different cases that you worked on, obviously trying to link them, the learnings from these cases to their business, it can be a highly productive time. They'll be engaged, they'll want to learn from what's happening with some of these other clients, and the odds are very good that it'll lead to new work for you because they'll want to do some of that. Another great idea, and maybe you could do this at the same time, is that you have your client present to the whole agency. Maybe they present to an office or they present to a part of the agency, but the more you can get into this conversation, the better. We would recommend that you have a client talk to the entire agency, explaining their business and their perspective and how they see the agency's work fitting in. Many of these people may not actually work on that account, but all the better, because whatever position they have within the agency, if they get a chance to hear how their work contributes to the success of this client and to hear the client talking about it, it will be motivating and inspiring. And the client gets the chance to meet the rest of the agency, talk about their business, which they will love to do, and make sure that they understand who's doing what within the agency. It's a great way, and in a semi-informal way, to engage people on both sides of the equation. Let's talk about how you deal with staff. This could be a whole lecture unto itself in terms of management, but one of the key things that we've learned over the years is something we call management by walking around. too easy to sit in your office or in your cubicle and send out directives, as we've talked about before. You really have to get out into the engine room where the work is being done. And if you happen to be in the engine room, then you need to get into the other one. If you're working as an account manager, then you should spend time sitting with the research people or the production people or the digital people and really understand what they do. And make sure that you're visible so that they see that you're paying attention to the day-to-day work. And communicate a short list of ideas and principles. Maybe you can send them a deck like this one that shows some thinking about how they can get themselves more engaged with their clients and how their ideas would be appreciated and recognized. Now, we're not talking about manuals or treatises on branding 101. It's really about how to engage people, inspire them, and motivate them. And of course, celebrate achievements. Sometimes even small achievements are worth celebrating. And if they are achievements that contribute to the client, all the better. Another topic that could also be its own talk is marketing the agency or the firm. At minimum, you should have a consistent content publishing plan, something that regularly distributes your thinking, intellectual capital work, anything that will alert your clients in general, as well as prospects and interested parties, to the work that you've been doing. This can't be a program of bombarding everybody with all the things that you do, but it should be organized and structured, and it should be consistent. Once you set about sharing what you do on a regular basis, you should stick to it. It's remarkable how well we often do this kind of thing for our clients, but not so well for us. And clients want to see it. They want to know that you are a leader in the business. It makes their job easier. It makes them feel more comfortable with their decision to work with you. And it's good for those in the company as well and the firm to understand where it is that your brand excels and differentiates itself, as we said earlier. Empowering and rewarding growth. We all talk about rewards. It's sometimes not so easy to do that financially in our increasingly tight budgets. But every success should be tied to performance. Phil's gone through in some detail ways to think about that. Whatever your compensation program is for account leads, they should absolutely be tied to measures of measuring up to account planning and whether or not you met objectives. For your staff, reward organic growth ideas. If ideas are bubbling forth from the staff because you've encouraged them to do it and something gets adopted, absolutely this should be celebrated within the firm. Another challenge is, especially in this virtual world where not all of us are even in the same office anymore and we're all phoning it in, so to speak, or dialing in, make sure there are clear responsibilities. Anytime there's confusion on an account where it's not understood who's doing what and what their role is in the overall organization, there's bound to be trouble. It's too easy to get into matrix reporting with all the digital lines going back and forth and dotted line reporting. It's very tough often for clients to know who's responsible for what. So make sure that's clear. Make sure it's clear within your organization and make sure it's clear to your client. I like to say if I'm walking into the room and I'm the senior person, I'm the throat to choke. And I want them to know that when there's trouble or if there's something that they need to make sure gets communicated, they know who to call. And with your more junior people, empower them. Presumably you've hired great talent. You certainly should, and you've kept the good ones, as Phil just pointed out. But give them the ability to make decisions and to act on behalf of the client. If every time a client has a request or they come up with a good idea and they have to go through a Byzantine layer of management structures and reportings just to get something done, it's only going to lead to dissatisfaction all around. So empower them to make decisions and to do what you know, what you've trained them to do. Above all, and this is returning to Phil's comments earlier, there should be no tolerance for people who don't strive to achieve. This is a business where exceptional talent and thinking is rewarded. We are a creative business generally. We try to come up with new ideas on a regular basis. And the only way you do that is by working hard and understanding the basics and always over-delivering. Don't tolerate people who don't believe that. And when you do find those people and you identify them, and you really should, make sure they are properly rewarded. Do you know which people your clients really love? The ones that they feel if they left, there would be a serious concern. And if you do know who these people are, what are you doing to retain them? How are you going to reward them? Have you sat down with each of them and talked about their value to your agency and to the client? Trust me, they know. But if they don't think you know, there will be trouble, and they will find another way to be rewarded and to be recognized, and it may not be with your agency. This is a critical factor in all of the things that we've talked about. The people who follow the work that we just laid out, who do make the effort, who really think through what's valuable for a client and really think through what the client wants and serve them well, are your most important asset. They should be rewarded, and you should make sure you're paying attention to them throughout. So we've covered 10 points. I'm hoping that most of these were ones that you recognized when Phil asked you at the beginning. They aren't rocket science, but they are difficult to do consistently. We talked about differentiating yourself as an agency or a service firm. We talked about how you build relationships and understand what your clients' motivations are. We talked about how you can organize organic growth and how it's everybody's business, not just a select few. We talked about how you have to know the client's business throughout and in detail, and have to have some passion for it. We talked about your agency's reputation versus competition, knowing your place in the grand scheme of things, and how important it is to develop an actionable plan for client service and regular review of that plan so that you see whether or not you're meeting the goals that you set for yourself and that your client is expecting you to meet. We went on to discuss communication and how important that is, not just on the official level of emails and formal conference reports and proposals, but on a different level where you actually engage with your clients. You bring them into the agency where you share with them your thinking and where you communicate with your own teams on a level that goes beyond just dictating orders. And rewarding and empowering people to make decisions and to come up with new ideas that are worthwhile to your client. And lastly, paying attention to the leaders in your company, both the current ones and the future ones, the people who the client is depending on to help them grow. Because we are, in fact, in the growth business. We're in the business to grow ourselves as agency and service representatives, and we are in the business of helping our clients grow. That's why they hire us. So as you contemplate all of this, we have a couple questions for you. Which of these ideas did you already know? Which of these do you think your agency does very well? And would your clients agree with that? As we said all along, it's common sense. None of this is rocket science, but it's the consistency of execution that makes the difference, and that's the hard part. Following the rigorous plans that you set for yourself and sticking to them and going back and making sure that they're still applicable, course correcting where necessary, but always having a plan. As the great golfer Gary Player famously remarked, the harder you practice, the luckier you get. We hope this has been of value to you, that you learned a few things new, but we also welcome any questions that you may have.
And Phil, that would be an understatement, or Hayes, that would be an understatement. We have gotten a lot of questions, so I'm glad we set aside time at the end for questions. First, and mea culpa, I should have mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that today's deck will be made available to all attendees. Now that everyone's written copious notes, apologies, I will be sending out the deck right after the webinar. This was great, great reinforcement and great reminders. And we are getting a lot of questions, so let's go to the questions. Any suggestions on getting client input We found it increasingly more difficult to get clients to make time for these types of meetings and low response rates on surveys.
Well, I think this is Phil. I think the key here is whether or not the clients see value in it. What we have learned is that it's absolutely critical if you meet with a client to ask them their point of view about what they need and how the agency can help. It's critical that you respond quickly with an actionable plan of what you're really going to do. The worst thing you can do is have a meeting with the client and then not appear to be responsive. In our experience, even senior clients will happily spend a lot of time with you if they think it's going to result in a better performance from the agency that will help them with their business.
Okay, next question. Our account people are good account leaders, but not necessarily good at being aware of what else is going on, at least at the client, nor are they good salespeople. Do you have any suggestions in terms of training them?
You want me to take that, Phil?
Yes, Hayes, please.
First, I have a hard time understanding how you can be a good client leader if you don't do the other parts that they just described. Maybe you are able to talk to junior people and give them direction for some kind. But the problem in agencies these days that we have seen is once upon a time there was funding for rigorous training programs. I know Y&R had one that was excellent when Phil and I were there. WPP has the Maestro program, and that's designed to teach people how to be great leaders and how to also manage groups. There are plenty of books on the subject, and there are consultancies that can help you do that. I don't have an easy answer for it other than perhaps you can have them listen to the, ask them to share in the presentation we just gave you. There are a lot of tips in there that particularly Phil laid out as to how to go do that. I don't know if that's as specific an answer as possible, but I think there's no shortage of information and training available if you know where to seek it.
Hayes, let me build on that. That there are a couple of things that you can do as a leader to instruct your people. So first of all, you must stop the current culture of people running away from the client office as soon as possible to get back to the agency. You should encourage them to stay in the hallways, to bring someone at the client a cup of coffee, to be there, to communicate, not just be running back and forth to the client office. And secondly, if there's an earnings call, did you walk down the hallway and ask them, one of your account people, what they thought of the earnings call? And if they give you that blank look of what earnings call, then you know you have a problem.
Okay, as the questions continue to come in, this is good stuff. How can you manage profitability while delivering on all of the things you mentioned?
It's a good question. You know, the truth of the matter is, if you don't do these things, you won't have profitability. The reality is you're going to lose some business. It's just a simple fact of life. It may not in any way be the fault of the agency, but for one reason or another, a client merger, a change of circumstances at the client, whatever, business may grow and it may also decline. So the critical thing here is you have to set goals to increase your existing business. And the only way it's going to happen is if you have a rigorous plan. And without that, you're not going to have a profitable agency.
Okay, let's go on. Do you have any suggestions on ways to reach the most senior client people with whom we have little or no contact?
Oh, that's a good question.
You want me to go first?
Yeah, well, the first question is, why don't you have any contact with the client?
Yeah.
Right. And I think another thing that possibly they can think about, there are times, and I've seen this in some of the agencies I've worked with, I know it happened at Landor, if you really feel that there's a disconnect and you have an idea, why don't you organize a task force of your own? If someone else isn't asking you to do it, but you see an opportunity, why don't you decide to pull a group of people together to solve a particular problem? It doesn't have to be a big problem, just a problem that you identified, and you present it up the line to your leaders. And if they're not receptive, and you have a good relationship, but you have other people within the company who might be able to get you in the door, I think you should make the effort to try to beat down a door and present. I've seen it happen. It's always impressive. It's a very poor leader who doesn't reward that kind of independent thinking. So sometimes you just have to take the initiative yourself and try to do it with some others so that it looks like it's a movement.
The other thing, Hayes, just building on what you were saying, if you do a good account plan, it will identify all of the people of the client that can impact the agency. And as part of identifying them, it will tell you, it will inform you as to their interests. And so, like we do in our regular lives, you connect with people by connecting with their interest. So there'll be a way, if you have a good plan and you work at it.
Okay, as the questions continue to come in, a lot of questions can continue to come in. It's 1:52. Let's keep going on the questions. We might run 1 or 2 minutes past 2 o'clock, but I think you'll all agree this is well worth it. Could you share any of your client scorecard examples? We often ask for formal feedback by many clients, but they don't want to just take the time.
You know, I truthfully, we don't typically have that experience. Even in the largest corporations, we typically have access to the highest level decision makers, and they're quite generous with their time. And the reason they're generous with their time is that the agency is back to those people within a short period of time, certainly no more than 30 days, with a plan that addresses the interest of the senior client. If you do that, they'll be happy to see you for good reason. If you don't, you can think about the business leaving the agency.
Okay. Much of what you recommended, you characterized as common sense. So why don't most agencies do these things?
Well, you know, the problem, the real problem is that most service providers are overwhelmed on a day-to-day basis, and the here and now crowds out the important. And what has to happen is strong agency leaders manage to make sure that the really important things still get done. Everything can't get done, but be sure the important things get done.
Okay, here's another great question. We all know project-based clients seems to be the theme these days. With so many project-based clients, how can we continually bring new ideas forward when clients aren't paying for this thinking?
Yeah, having faced that problem more than once. Yeah, it's called investment spend. You must get in front of them, and it's essentially a pitch. It's a warm pitch because they already know you, but coming to them with an idea, and I would be hard pressed to think that a client wouldn't sit still for a reasonable idea or approach. Again, though, I'd be careful that it isn't just an idea that only serves you as the agency. If you come to them with a bigger notion of how this might work for them, where your role is in that effort is important, but maybe you bring in another agency or another service. One thing we used to do is, I remember one time our clients, I was approached by a music branding firm that was pretty successful. It wasn't really something that we were ever going to do, and it wasn't something that we were necessarily going to make much money on, but I made sure that I brought it in front of clients, brought these people in front of clients because they were very professional. It was a fascinating topic and an important one. And the clients were very happy to sit and listen to it. Sometimes they would buy into it, other times they wouldn't, but we got credit for bringing the idea. And just to finish on that, out of that, it's FaceTime. They know you're thinking about them, and the odds are very good that you will continue to be top of mind when they are looking to get things done.
Okay, which segues into another financial-oriented question. How can we best balance the client valuing agency's time, but at the same time not make the client feel like engaging an agency is punitive financially?
It's all about, truthfully, it's all about the quality of the output. Clients in general are no longer willing to pay attention or discuss the inputs. That's not what they're paying for. In their mind, it's all about the quality of the output. And so that's where the world is.
Okay, here's a question. I mean, why do agencies not pay enough attention to existing clients?
Oh, well, I'll tell you one reason is it's cool to go after and to do a new pitch,
Sure.
To go after a new client, and it's competitive and it gets everybody's adrenaline running and people get focused. There's a department in most agencies, or a person or a couple of people who are responsible for business development, so that there's a structure that surrounds it that makes it a little easier, and it makes it somebody else's job. What we're arguing here, and I think I said it earlier, is you need to pitch your current clients continuously, but not in a hard sell way, but as the trusted advisor, bringing them ideas, challenging them to make sure that you're doing the job that they expect you to, doing plans and setting goals, and then measuring yourself with them against those goals. All of that is about making sure that your clients understand the value that you're bringing. If we spent more time as agencies on doing that, as opposed to chasing after highly competitive situations, the return, the ROI on that is significantly better.
Yes, and to build on Hayes's point, most agencies, small, medium, even large, will have a town hall meeting to celebrate a new client win.
Right.
Sadly, I don't see any town hall meetings typically to celebrate an additional assignment from an existing client. And that's a real loss.
I think one of the key takeaways that you had mentioned was inviting the clients in for once a year for a capabilities presentation. I can remember in my years working, how many clients have come into the agency has done a capabilities pitch, and the client has said, "We had no idea you offer these services." That has happened time and time again. So I think it's a great idea, at least once a year, invite the client in to the agency for a capabilities presentation. But let's go, more questions continue to come in. Can you name agencies who are good at client retention?
No.
Okay.
But that's not because there aren't some who are doing it. We can't get into naming agencies.
Okay.
There are some who do it well. There are, but the days of the 30-year and 40-year client agency relationships are probably over. Very hard to find. I think I am thinking of a couple of agencies who I know continue to broaden what they offer. They kind of go off the grid a little bit in terms, and in this digital interactive world we have, there really are no limits to where you can take a client, provided you have some expertise to offer. And so I think, I'm kind of dancing around the answer because I can't give you the names, but I know of one agency in particular that is really good about linking different parts of their business to communication services that they can offer in one form or another. And they do it by keeping them engaged.
Okay. Can you share some other examples of how to build business with project-oriented client relationships once the work has concluded?
Well, yes. We talked about having clients come in. Another thing that we used to do when I was at Landor is that we would have sort of cocktail receptions, if you will. They were at the agency. We'd invite 3 or 4 clients, or in some cases it would be a client, and then it would be maybe an academic, and then maybe someone who wasn't a client but was an expert in a certain field, and they would come in and talk about digital, or they'd come in and talk about a brand purpose or something along those lines. And we would invite our clients to it. We'd have our people there. You'd get probably 30 or 40 people. It'd be a little wine and cheese. Wasn't very expensive. Sometimes we would videotape them so we could share them later. But it was a great way to invite clients in to have just a conversation, an elevated conversation, hopefully, about the topic at hand. And you become the forum. You become the idea generator, not so much the generator, but the place where ideas happen, which is what an agency should be thought of, I think. And they were always very well received. It's a great way to informally engage with your clients, but at very little expense.
Okay, as the questions continue to come in, these are all excellent suggestions, but we're understaffed already and our teams are overworked. What sounds familiar?
Yes.
The kind of client attention and service you're advocating takes time and resources. How would you prioritize your recommendations if we can't do them all?
Well, I'll start, and we're going to sound a bit like a broken record. First, if this isn't your first priority, what is? This is called serving the clients. So, and we understand everybody is strained. But if you have a plan, the first thing you should do is write a plan. And even if it's a one-pager, without a plan, it's a random effort. And people usually end up going in different directions and there's no coordination. It doesn't take very long to sit down and write out a client plan and to set some expectations. It doesn't cost a thing. It's just staying focused. And we all know what happens in real life, that we all get off track on various things. But if you pull the plan out once every month or two and make sure that if you have deviated, there was a good reason, in which case you adjust the plan, the odds are good that you're going to start acting in a very focused way. Bill, I know you probably have thought on that too.
Well, look, I just think it's a matter of, again, we're talking about the clients that account for 80% of the agency's income. So as Hayes just said, even if it's just, a couple of pieces of paper, there really should be some kind of a coherent plan of who at the agency is going to match whom at the client. I mean, and what's the forum for that? How is it going to be done? I mean, it's hard for me to comprehend that an agency runs well without such a plan.
Okay, my computer is telling me it is 2:04. There are at least 10 more questions we have not gotten to. Phil and Hayes, I'm hoping for those people whose questions we have not gotten to, if they send you an email, you will respond. Again, the deck will be made available to everyone. Just a couple of reminders. We have 2 webinars next week, one dealing with legal issues affecting social media so that you won't have to retain an attorney, and another webinar on how to power creativity outside the creative department. At 3 o'clock, each of you will be getting a survey about today's webinar. If you would return it, it would be greatly appreciated. Phil, Hayes, thanks for a great webinar. Really appreciate it. As we talked, we will have you back on the webinar circuit very soon. We thank everyone for tuning in. Have a great holiday all, and we hope to see you soon on another Filament Web Clinic. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.